this video, we're going to look at the clear coat feature in Vue, how it can be used and how it can be adapted to produce some special effects that have been quite tricky to produce in the past. First things first, let's get a rough idea of what we're talking about in terms of clear coat. Clear coat, traditionally we speak about clear coat in terms of car body finishes. It's the transparent varnish or lacquer, or as they call it, the clear coat, which goes on top of the car body paint, which gives its reflectivity, its shininess, its flawless finish in an ideal world. However, we'll look at how we can adapt our clear coat finish to take into account damage and dirt, etc. One of the things we need to be aware of is the terminology, the word roughness, which we see in CG. Every surface in the world is reflective. That's human skin, brick, water, everything. But what is different in every substance is the roughness of the surface. The rougher a surface becomes, the less reflective it becomes, or it diffuses the reflection to the point where you can't make out any detail. So in terms of view and rendering, in the past what we've had reflective surfaces. Reflective surfaces are consistent. They don't change unless we go into the function editor and start playing with the angle of incidence and the angle of refraction, etc., etc. Clear coat makes this a little easier for us, because once the clear coat is applied, you'll see a subtle difference in the way that the paintwork performs. So you can see, whilst it retains its reflectivity and its glossiness, as angles change, so does the reflectivity and the way that the clear coat performs. So in particular, when we look at a glossy surface like this, we end up a little bit closer and we can see that it's, just a flat reflective surface, but it behaves differently dependent upon the angle of refraction and reflection. Especially on curved edges, we can see that the effect is taking place. So we just talked about roughness very quickly, and that roughness in our clear coat, which we'll look at in a moment, results in a completely matte or flat or non-reflective surface. In other words, it has so many microscopic imperfections, as it were, in the surface, that the reflection is so scattered as to make it basically invisible. There is no reflection. And then we move on to the notion that with our clear coat, we can make it look dirty, we can make it look damaged. And this is determined again by the roughness. And we can see there is some reflectivity going on, but if we zoom in and have a look, you can see that our reflectivity varies dependent upon the roughness map that I've applied to this surface. So it's, simulating greasy handprints, a very fine layer of dirt. You can see the dirt applied to the tires is different to the fine layer of dirt we see on this surface. And further to that, we can look at the way that the clear coat performs. You can see the sun is coming from the top right hand corner. So the clear coat, because of the angle of reflection and refraction, etc., etc., we can see the dirt. We can see that film of dirt over the surface, but in the middle here, you can't see it at all because of the refraction and reflection. And again, we can move on to much more complex effects, which we'll look at in a moment. So getting down to Vue itself, I've quickly made a very simple meta blob, just so we can see how what I've just explained to you performs on a curved surface. It's the best way to see what's going on. So if I've just very quickly render this, you'll see that I've got it's just a black reflective set of spheres linked together as a meta blob with some displacement on, so we can see a couple of other effects which are going to happen. So that's the model that we're going to use to demonstrate this. And let's just have a look at the material as it stands at the moment. It's just a simple material. We have all the usual tabs, color, bump, normal, etc., etc. I'm going to apply the clear coat layer, but because clear coat is a physically correct material, i.e. it follows the laws of physics, we find that in our PBR materials, physically based rendered materials. And you'll see that immediately the material changes because we start working with roughness. And that roughness is determining our reflectivity. So if we look at the roughness tab straight away, you can see that the intensity is at 0, i.e. it's a fully reflective surface. I'm not using metalness, I've left that down at 0. We're not interested in metallicity, if that's a word. At the moment, what we're looking at and particularly interested in is this new tab. Remember, it's in the PBR material, and it's the clear coat tab. So we've got a bunch of sliders as usual. We've got settings that we can play with at the front end, but we can also access different settings in the function editor, which we're going to look at in a second. But first things first, let's switch the intensity. Keep an eye here. Intensity of the clear coat from 0%, i.e. it's not there at all, to 100%. Now straight away we can see that there is a difference in reflectivity and a difference in way the light is behaving. Okay, and we can do a comparison between the two renders. So the blue outline is the first render without clear coat, and then we add the clear coat. You can see there is a subtle difference again as per in the buggy I showed you earlier. What we're particularly interested in are now the other sliders. We can tint our clear coat, i.e. we can give that a little bit of a color. Paler colors generally work better. The stronger colors take over completely. And you can see now that we've got a hint of orange in the reflectivity of the clear coat. Just wait for that to render through. You can see that the orange is faintly starting to appear. I'm going to remove that and put that back to white. We don't want that confusing any issues. And now we're on to roughness. Remember, if I turn the roughness up to 100%, it now becomes a completely matte or flat or reflectionless surface. It'll still react obviously to light and shade, but there will be no reflection going on, as you can see. Still quite a nice effect. It's got all sorts of applications. The clear coat, it's something I've enjoyed very much experimenting with as the developers have been pushing this forward. We can also change the refractive index. Remember, we have a coating on top of here now. It's a layer, but not in the traditional sense. It's applied, on the base layer itself. So we can turn up the refractive index to 2. Don't really recommend it going much higher than 2 if you want to stay physically correct. And again, we'll do a comparison with this one. So you can see how the renders change in terms of reflectivity again. Put this back down to 1. Well, let's look at it at 1, because 1 means there's no refractive index whatsoever, so it's transparent, and we'll see that in a second. So it's not distorting the surface at all, it's not changing the surface. And less than 1, 0.33. To be honest, I don't know what this is going to do, so this will be interesting. Again, looks more of a metal surface, but the point is the flexibility is provided within the slider, within the settings, so that we can experiment to hopefully produce results that our developers weren't really expecting and are artistically pleasing. And I will upset them just simply by pointing out we can go over 100% in terms of the intensity of the clear coat finish. So it gets more and more extreme. You can see how the light is bent and refracted around the edge. It's around the edges of curved objects, it's really apparent. Let's put that back down to 100. Now the flattening, all that does is if you can imagine the fact that we are painting varnish, a lacquer, or spraying on a clear coat, the flattening kind of reproduces a thicker layer, shall we say. At the moment, it's just the standard base layer, probably correctly applied by a skilled user of or a skilled car painter. But up here at 100%, what it's doing is it's filling in the cracks and the crevices between the high points in the displacement and producing a smoother, blobbier kind of effect. It's the effect that looks like it's been dipped in glass almost, yeah? So it's filled up the gap between all of the lumps and the bumps. Quite interesting. I'm seeing that as a potential for ice. It's something I'll be playing with certainly in the future, trying to reproduce ice using the clear coat. But getting back to our particular interest, which is the roughness and playing with the roughness, I'm just going to turn the displacement down to 0 so that we can really see what's going on. So we get some nice smooth spheres. Unfortunately, guys, this is where we end up in the function editor, because we want to put some variable roughness on, and we're going to drive that with a function. So instead of a constant clear coat roughness, I'm going to be looking at using an image-based projection. So I'm going to project a texture map, and that projected texture map it can be a color image if you like, because obviously VUE will translate that back into shades of grey, a grayscale image. But I've got a dirty or a roughness map that I got from a vendor on ArtStation. I'll put the link on where I got it from. You should be seeing that at the bottom of the screen right now. But for the moment, let's apply that map. VUE wants to know what kind of map it is, and we're going to tell them it's a roughness map. So all we're saying here is, parametric. We're saying that where it's white, it's 100% rough. In other words, there is no reflectivity. Whereas as it gets down to dark and down to black, where it's black, there's no effect on the roughness at all. So if we look at this now, just wait for this render to run through, and we should be able to start to see fairly quickly now that we've got a surface which is affected by the dirt on that layer. In other words, it's really covering up or exposing reflective areas. So some areas will reflect more than others, hence reproducing a dirty surface. This can be taken even further into producing effects such as water running over any kind of surface, really. And the water is produced by a sequence of images which are blended together by VUE to produce an animation of water running down the surface. But again, this is using the clear coat, much more simple than having to delve deep into the function editor to try and get this kind of functionality. I hope you found this useful. Keep an eye open in our channel on YouTube, because I will be doing some tips and tricks once I've investigated things like ice and dirt and damage, etc. I anticipate this being quite an interesting area of experimentation for increasing the reality of our renders. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.